Well, welcome everybody. Bienvenue tout le monde. Bonjour. My name is Michelle Legault. I'm the Executive Director of the CSLA and the LACF, and I'm happy to be your host today for this webinar. Before we get started, I'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement. So I would ask you to place your feet on the ground and breathe the air at your location. We acknowledge that we're gathering today from coast to coast to coast on the lands of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people and their governments. We acknowledge that the head office of the CSLA is in unceded Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory, and the head office of the AALA is in Treaty 6 Métis Region 4. And that's important because this is a co-hosted CSLA and AALA webinar today. And so I'd like to welcome you to this webinar series, which features speakers who were scheduled to speak at the canceled June 2020 event in Calgary. So we're very pleased to be able to present all of these speakers to you. We started in December and we have another event to follow. We've been doing monthly webinars, which have been very successful. We're going to go ahead and proceed with the presentation. And I would encourage you to ask questions either using the chat box or the Q&A feature, and we'll have an opportunity for questions at the end. So we'll reserve some time for discussion. In addition, this recording will be eventually available on the CSLA website, so you can go back and refer to it as you like. I should mention that you're participating today in a Zoom webinar format, which means that you can only see the speakers and not all of the participants. So slightly different than a regular Zoom room. So with that, I'm so pleased to welcome our speaker today, Enrica Dall'Ara, who is presenting Landscape in Motion, Interdisciplinary Methodology to Inform Design Processes. Enrique Delara is founder and director of the Italian firm Park, which is based in Italy. Recent projects include the urban renewal of the Pavaglioni courtyard in Lugo, winning first prize in a national design competition in 2012, being awarded the best completed project of the International S-Arch Awards in 2018, among her many, many accolades. Currently, she is assistant professor at the School of Architecture, Landscape and Planning at the University of Calgary in Alberta. And so I would ask you to help me in welcoming Enrica for today's presentation. And Enrica, I'll pass it off to you.
Thank you, Michelle. Good afternoon. Sorry, just a moment to get started sharing my screen. Good afternoon. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to introduce the current project, Landscape in Motion, co-authored with choreographer Melanie Kloetzel within this webinar series. I want to thank the Canadian Society of Landscape Architects and the Alberta Association of Landscape Architects for having me, and all you attending the event today. The project is conceived as creative research in the fields of landscape design and performing digital arts. Through an interdisciplinary approach, we aim to develop a new site-sensitive methodology that honors cultural, aesthetic, and environmental heritage in both urban renewal design processes and in site-based arts. Landscape in Motion draws on research supported by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada through an Insight Development Grant. The project benefits from consultation with the landscape ecologist Dr. Mary Ellen Tyler, community members and project consultants Jennifer Mahood, Chantal Wall, and Linear Swan, cinematographers, and Robin Tufts, musician. We would like to extend our appreciation for the thoughtful, creative, and enthusiastic contribution by research assistants Gordon Skilling, Tungo Bushra Hashim, Emily King with the School of Architecture, Planning and Landscape, and Zoe Abrigo, Cindy Ansa, Stephanie Drukova, and Alisa Maturino with the School of Creative and Performing Arts. This project focuses on the infrastructures and industrial areas in the richly layered neighborhoods of Ramsey and Inglewood in Calgary, Alberta. These areas were the subject of landscape analysis and design within a landscape architecture studio course I taught at the University of Calgary in 2018 and 2019. The investigative process that emerged from the course inspired the further research work that we present here. The Ramsey and Inglewood neighborhood boast complex interfaces between the city center, rivers, cultural heritage sites, mobility infrastructure, industrial sites, brownfields, and vacant lands. The area is also crossed by the Canadian Pacific Railway, CPR, historic infrastructure with significant symbolism, but controversial value due to the fact that it is representative of how European settlements impacted the places of great importance for indigenous people. The frequent, lasting metallic noise of the CPR trains constantly recalls this contentious history. Mixed land use and related diverse urban tissues create a peculiar landscape made of contrasts, frictions, and disorientations. But it is also one that offers much to fascinate both residents and designers. At the present, the implementation of city plans in Calgary includes the construction of a new LRT line that will radically alter the Ramsey-Inglewood area. The city considers this infrastructure as both an evolution of the transit system and a platform for development. This impending and indeed already in process transformation drove me to seek out innovative ways to both preserve and highlight the cultural heritage of Ramsey and Inglewood, the aura, the genius loci of these places, while also developing a methodological process that may be applied to other urban renewal endeavors. To enact this investigation, I approached Melanie and asked if she would be interested in collaborating on a project that would explore the current landscape of Inglewood and Ramsey from the perspective of artistic inquiry on a human bodily scale. Thus, as the project Landscape in Motion was born. This presentation will focus on the processes of first developing a methodology for the project, and second, defining a lexicon and a representation structure for the key output of score maps, an annotation system that serves as a means to inform both landscape design and choreographic creation processes. The project takes as a premise that urban infrastructures and their hardscapes can be reimagined as a cultural and or green infrastructure through the mechanism of the human body. Within the project, the body, and more specifically, movement and dance, acts as a measuring and perceptual tool to highlight and evaluate the potential of urban infrastructure for their environmental and social value. The artistic expressions serve as a poetics for both site investigation and recording, and is particularly inspired by land art and other site-based artistic efforts. One contribution that has been critical to our project is the well-known intersection of landscape design and choreography by American landscape architect Lawrence Holprin and dancer choreography Anna Holprin, his wife. In particular, the Holprin's notation drawings have been significant as they translated notational systems for dance landscape interactions into diagrammatic representation, which function to document, direct, and depict movement through space over time. Pondering on their pioneering efforts, we wondered if we could build on such an approach to effect more sensitive inquiries into the cultural and perceptual values of urban landscapes in face of major urban revitalization efforts and avoid generic gentrification. We embarked on a project that would examine existing urban landscapes using both spatial data, mapping, and experiential activities, on-site surveys, and site-specific physical and oral performance methods in order to develop specific creative outputs, including digital landscape representation, score maps to influence landscape design and choreographic creation, dance films, documentary of the process, landscape meta design for the site. The goal is for this output to be interactively linked to each other and available through an online platform. MAPI is carried out as an interpretive and creative process of landscape investigation and design, as it is peculiar within the landscape architecture approach. Background research began while teaching the landscape architecture studio course at the University of Calgary. In particular, the analysis phase included an investigation of Inglewood Ramsing using methods that emphasize the role of both structural morphological systems and components related to cultural, perceptual, and symbolic values, including ephemeral or intangible conditions. A key question is how to preserve, reveal, or enhance the aura of the place through sensitive design, as I had the opportunity to recall within a recent essay, L'atmosfera nel progetto di paesaggio, the atmosphere in landscape design. In summer 2019, Melanie and I began making multiple journeys through the neighborhoods. These walks figure as critical for the project's development in order to ensure a depth of analysis of particular sites, as well as for addressing the smaller scale of the human body within the grander scale of neighborhoods as a whole. As potential sites began to emerge, including a neighborhood park, Jeffries Park in Ramsey, marginalized spaces adjacent to rail tracks nearby the Ramsey Design Center, hosted in a historic building, and the courtyard of the oldest building in Inglewood, a series of questions also began to surface, including, among others, how could the four-dimensional nature of lived and dance experience be translated into MAPI? What combination of viewing would support the process? How can we ensure that our annotation integrates physical characteristics of space and non-physical characteristics, quoting rows such as images, impressions, meanings, or experiences? What kind of mapping would be possible for dancers to enact to support the intended score map? And critically, how could mapping and language in both design and dance be used in a way that would not reenact colonial imperatives? Through our work, we aim at emphasizing the role of time in defining both the palimpsest of the site and the human cognitive experience of it. We started to employ the term experiential archaeology to help frame the upcoming mapping endeavor. As an idea, we thought of experiential archaeology as a way to highlight the personal and the experiential nature of being in place and ensure the inclusion of diverse bodies that have traversed a site over time. Thus, as the project progressed into the mapping phase, the dance portion of the team began to conceptualize its on-site exploration around this, from the site-specific perspective, Melanie framed the mapping project for the dance members of the research team around her recent anthology, Site Dance, co-edited with Caroline Pavlik, that lays out four main concerns with the site-specific performance: history, phenomenological and physical interactivity, aesthetics, and community relationship. Thus, as the project progressed into the mapping phase, the dance portion of the team began to conceptualize its on-site exploration around these four main areas. Their first visit to each individual site focused on the physical component of the site and sensory input. A second mapping phase about, quote, environmental dialogues prioritized physical and phenomenological engagement with the site and focused on action terminology that arose from improvisational interaction. While the dancers focus on their personal experience of site, the landscape architecture team embraces the concept that double glances should be fostered in a cross-scalar way, a small-scale glance at proximity and detail, and a large-scale glance at the landscape systems and scenery. The need for an in-depth investigation into the historical evolution of the site also emerged as critical, as we wanted to interpret and represent simultaneously both space and time, key markers of analysis within both disciplines. From this approach, we developed a series of methods that emphasize the key historical periods, including present day and infrastructure of the area. These maps were layered into an axonometric representation integrated with a timeline. By complementing the maps with perspective views, viewers can gain a more immediate understanding of the environment's features. These landscape representations and information were shared with the entire team to assist with recognizing the site evolution over time and the distinct landscape palimpsests of the area. To add to these insights, the whole team was able to join with 2 Ramsey residents, also consultants for the project, in order to glean a deeper understanding of the sites from the community perspective. For creating historical maps and community maps, the dance research team used what Melanie started calling a light flaneuse approach to consider what kind of movement and sensory experiences may have been readily or frequently experienced by a diversity of Ramsey and Inglewood residents at each site. In the community-focused mapping, age range stood out as critical based on the personal narratives we heard, prompting the dance researcher to adopt different age lenses for their mapping. An additional step to support the fieldwork, we also arranged for a session with a team member, Melanie Tyler, landscape ecology, so that the whole research team could be informed by more than human concepts around plant and animal ecology. Compiling and synthesizing all this information, the dance research team then created comprehensive action-oriented maps that could function as a critical base for the development of the final score maps by the landscape design team. In order to create relevant and applicable content within the score maps for both dance and landscape architecture, the team focused on terminology and concepts that are significant for both disciplines. To start, we reflected on our principal intentions for linking the fields of landscape design and site-specific dance, specifically analyzing and beneficially impacting the way we interact with and live in the urban environment, life in the landscape. Aspects of this analysis include 1, emphasizing the key role of cognitive experiences, sensory impressions, and sense of place for affecting our relationship to place. 2, deciphering and dialoguing with the atmosphere of the place. 3, fostering a respectful and meaningful human-environment relationship. And finally, exploring the interactions as a key element, as the relationship and action of the dancers with the site offers a baseline for further analysis. Therefore, the score maps prioritize annotations that specify key actions by the dancers, as well as refer to quality of these actions and delve into space and time. For example, spatial information includes essential components such as urban fabric, circulation infrastructure, topography, vegetation patterns, and so on. These are then integrated with annotations regarding human interactions with the environment, specifically such choreographic inputs as background, foreground, pathway, movement trace, etc. The time dimension poses different challenges attempted to illustrate the longer-term temporal aspects of landscape processes alongside the much shorter temporal experience of human movement. To address the complexity of the project, we have found that hybrid representation techniques, as well as composite and multimedia visualization, offers the best potential. This approach arose as a consequence of our intention to develop an annotation system whose iconography is both expressive and immediate to read. Through the crafting of score map prototypes, the intention and the challenge were to translate the main contents above mentioned into a graphical representation defining symbols and codes. Combining multiple views allows for different and complementary information. Plan views act as an overview of the main spatial organization of landscape components, bodies, and actions, while perspective view more powerfully expresses the scenery along with the imagery of specific body-place relationships enacted by the dancers. As a first level of coding, components that play the role of codes or symbols are represented in color or by means of photographic collage for emphasis. Conversely, the elements that serve as a neutral basis are in black and white, traced through simple wireframes. The color coding we adopted to distinguish significant historical periods during the landscape analysis phase has been used throughout the process of crafting the score maps. Beyond this main structure, we are exploring how call-out drawings allow us to change scale and multiply the possibilities to add more detailed information, and how cross-references between various media can be structured, anticipating also the future development of an interactive online platform. Now I'm showing examples from the latest score map drafts for Jeffreys Park, a plan view synopsis, informing about the various specific areas engaged by the dancers, complemented by choreographical inputs, developed following 4 themes: history or timeline of gesture, environmental dialogues, more than human, and community. One single circle diagram specifying actions via verbs and related qualifiers via adjectives, and the related perspective view. After crafting the score maps prototypes as iterations of the score maps began to take shape, we faced the difficulty of simultaneously highlighting the main landscape features that characterizes the site and the human interactions with the environment. Consequently, we made the decision to provide detailed information on the actions and motions at the micro scale of the body and the body's parts through sequences of photographs which represent individual actions and their respective qualities. Regarding Jeffreys Park, then for the dance films, choreographical inputs annotated previously by theme, environmental dialogues, community, etc., were selected and interpreted into a new synthesis. As an example, I would like now to show a preview of the dance film at the Tree Pathway area. The sound is the natural sound from the site. It is very thin. I have interrupted the video. I'm going to conclude with final notes. We believe that the process of intertwining our disciplines, landscape design and site-based dance, is promising from the perspective of deepening our understanding of urban landscapes and enriching the discourse on our cities. In terms of first reflections on useful outcomes for landscape architecture practice, I would highlight the following remarks. From the work with the dancers team, we are receiving confirmation regarding aspects that we deem fundamental in landscape design, such as the value of little things, an appreciation of simplicity. We seek simplicity by design and also by abstaining from design when abstaining is most appropriate. The fragility, beauty, and power of the human body and the relevance of creating comfortable and welcoming spaces at the human scale within the cities. The cultural and societal values embedded in the ecology of the place. Moreover, the quality of the dancers' movement and their narration of the landscape as a poetic expression, as well as the micro scale of the dancers' gestures, as if through a magnifying glass, emphasizes key aspects of the landscape's materiality, showcasing its grain with greater detail, engaging tactility and other sensuous stimuli, and communicating the intensity of the landscape and the intensity of the life in the landscape. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Enrica, for a very interesting and fascinating presentation. Just a reminder to our participants today, please submit your questions through either the chat or the Q&A box. We'd be happy to take the questions. Note also that a recording of this will be made available on the CSLA website just as soon as we can get it loaded up. So that usually takes us about a week to turn that around. And that's under the events tab and the 2020 Congress webinar series. So while we're waiting for questions to come in, I just want to also let you know that we have one more webinar in our series. It'll be the last. So we hope that you'll join us for the next webinar in the series on May 13th. At 2:30 p.m. Eastern for Ryan Coates, who will be presenting Region 40, a national park for the Anthropocene epoch. So that will be the next event in our series. And so we have a few questions coming in here. So from Daniel.
I cannot hear you, Michelle, sorry.
Michelle just spontaneously froze there.
Maybe she's back soon for us.
Let me see if I can find the question that was being asked.
Yeah, I can also look at the chat.
Oh, there she comes back.
I guess it was me.
It was you this time.
My apologies. It looked like my internet just glitched for a moment and I disappeared.
I
find it.
Apologies. That's why Todd is here for a backup and how to give an executive director a heart attack. Have the internet cut out. So we did have some questions come in. Karen from the Northwest Territories asks, thank you for the presentation. How did the community react to the dance?
So, so far there is, this is really a preview of the work and introduction. We haven't yet shared what we are doing to a large public, but if you mean the reaction during the performance, there was no much people around. An anecdote I can share is that at Jeffreys Park, while the dancers were working on site and were performing the actions, studying the actions, so preparatory work, there were moments with a kid that was far, but in the same park. And the kid was imitating the dancers, so was repeating from afar, staying in a corner what they were doing. And I would say that maybe among the remarks, it was also an experience to the dancers are representative of us as humans, as human bodies, and as a community. So it's not just about the dancer's body, but it's about us. And the playful way they engaged with the site and the playful way the kid was imitating, I felt was a great result, because sometimes when we approach design processes, we think to add a lot. We think that we have to add on what is there. But many times there is all what we need. So the intervention could be actually very minimal, and we don't need to formalize anything, everything. So that, I mean, probably was not strictly related to the question, but talking about kids and the playfulness of the experience, I felt to.
Thank you, Enrica. We also have a question from Barbara. She says, my partner has been exploring somatics, movement, and landscape architecture, and would love to hear more about your work. Have you studied play as well as a form of improvised dance?
Playing?
Have you studied play as well as a form of improvised dance?
So I'm not one of the dancers, and I'm not the choreographer. So I'm the landscape architectural component of the discussion. Their approximation, approach, and interaction of the site really is improvisational to an extent. For instance, in the first visits and engagement of the dancers with the site, we withheld information, background information about the sites, because we wanted them to sense the site without too many intoxications before the exploration.
Thank you, Enrique. And that might actually provide an answer to Jean-Jacques' question, which is, why did you choose dancers and not a child, for example, to show the characteristics of the landscape?
That is a great question. I like the question. It could have been a child. So this project in my mind started even before joining Canada. I have been always attracted by the relationship between arts and the landscape, and the potential of art expression to tell the story of the landscape in a poetic way. So my initial focus was about the poetry of the site, and I felt that the dancers were the most appropriate bodies to transmit the poetry of the sites. Then the project developed with Melanie, and we had several brainstormings, and it started taking shape here with her. But I would say that for me, the dancers' engagement is because of the artistic medium to reveal the landscape as first prompt to the project.
Well, we have a lovely comment here from Hyde, who's saying, truly fascinating and powerful work. I need to sit with this for a while because I'm recognizing many ways in which intuitive sense into design with the land and its qualities. I've never known how to fully convey these powerful internal senses to others, and your work offers new ways to work collectively and effectively with subtle and truly practical post-build impacts. Thank you so much for daring to be so creative and alive. So that's a nice comment.
Very nice comment, thank you. I'm very happy. This is a light of the day.
And we have another question from Gregory. Would the dance component change with different seasons of the year?
In terms of people?
I would assume so.
Okay, so I think the seasonality of research assistants and the dancers as well depends on their engagement with the two schools. So for instance, there was a dancer that initially was part of the dancers team that then graduated and took other ways in her life, and someone else came to join the team, and the same in the landscape architecture team. We had several people over time, but there is a continuity. Yes, I would say that for the dancers component especially, there was a continuity.
Well, Enrica, on behalf of the CSLA and the AALA, we really want to thank you for presenting today. I think, we're really happy that even though we had to cancel our Congress last June, that we're able to share all of this knowledge. So we really appreciate you taking the time to prepare this for us. And for those of you still on the webinar, I would remind you that the last series in our webinar series will be on May 13th. At 2:30, where Ryan Coates will present Region 40, a national park for the Anthropocene epoch. So I really hope that you'll join us as well. We've had tremendous participation in all of our webinars, over 100 people at every single one. So we're really pleased. And I want to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you to you to make it real despite the circumstances, and people attending today was a great attendance. I hope it was useful, and I enjoyed the time sharing what we are doing. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And I think from the comments we received, they really appreciated hearing from you.
Thank you. I had a little problems with the mouse, so sometimes the slides were trembling, but still I hope it was clear to take away some ideas from here.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Enrica.
Thank you. Thank you again.